lies behind the superior vena cava and part of the right atrium, and below the azygous vein. That of the left lung passes beneath the aortic arch and in front of the descending aorta. The phrenic nerve, the pericardiacophrenic artery and vein, and the anterior pulmonary plexus lie in front of each, and the vagus and posterior pulmonary plexus behind each. Below each is the pulmonary ligament. The chief structures composing the root of each lung are arranged in a similar manner from before backward on both sides, viz., the upper of the two pulmonary veins in front, the pulmonary artery in the middle, and the bronchus, together with the bronchial vessels, behind. From above downward, on the two sides, their arrangement differs thus. On the right side their position is eparterial bronchus, pulmonary artery, hyparterial bronchus, pulmonary veins, but on the left side their position is pulmonary artery, bronchus, pulmonary veins. The lower of the two pulmonary veins is situated below the bronchus, at the apex or lowest part of the hilus. Divisions of the bronchi. Just as the lungs differ from each other in the number of their lobes, so the bronchi differ in their mode of subdivision. The right bronchus gives off, about 2.5 centimeters from the bifurcation of the trachea, a branch for the superior lobe. This branch arises above the level of the pulmonary artery, and is therefore named the eparterial bronchus. All the other divisions of the main stem come off below the pulmonary artery, and consequently are termed hyparterial bronchi. The first of these is distributed to the middle lobe, and the main tube then passes downward and backward to the inferior lobe, giving off in its course a series of large ventral and small dorsal branches. The ventral and dorsal branches arise alternately, and are usually 8 in number, 4 of each kind. The branch to the middle lobe is regarded as the first of the ventral series. The left bronchus passes below the level of the pulmonary artery before it divides, and hence all its branches are hyparterial. It may therefore be looked upon as equivalent to that portion of the right bronchus which lies on the distal side of its eparterial branch. The first branch of the left bronchus arises about 5 centimeters from the bifurcation of the trachea, and is distributed to the superior lobe. The main stem then enters the inferior lobe, where it divides into ventral and dorsal branches similar to those in the right lung. The branch to the superior lobe of the left lung is regarded as the first of the ventral series. Structure. The lungs are composed of an external serous coat, a subserous areolar tissue, and the pulmonary substance or parenchyma. The serous coat is the pulmonary pleura. It is thin, transparent, and invests the entire organ as far as the root. The subserous areolar tissue contains a large proportion of elastic fibers. It invests the entire surface of the lung and extends inward between the lobules. The parenchyma is composed of secondary lobules which, although closely connected together by an interlobular areolar tissue, are quite distinct from one another and may be teased asunder without much difficulty in the fetus. The secondary lobules vary in size. Those on the surface are large, of pyramidal form, the base turned toward the surface. Those in the interior smaller and of various forms. Each secondary lobule is composed of several primary lobules, the anatomical units of the lung. The primary lobule consists of an alveolar duct, the air spaces connected with it, and their blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves. The intrapulmonary bronchi divide and subdivide throughout the entire organ, the smallest subdivisions constituting the lobular bronchioles. The larger divisions consist of 1. An outer coat of fibrous tissue in which are found at intervals irregular plates of hyaline cartilage, most developed at the points of division. 2. Internal to the fibrous coat, a layer of circularly disposed smooth muscle fibers, the bronchial muscle, and 3. Most internally, the mucous membrane, lined by columnar ciliated epithelium resting on a basement membrane. The corium of the mucous membrane contains numerous elastic fibers running longitudinally and a certain amount of lymphoid tissue. It also contains the ducts of mucus glands, the acini of which lie in the fibrous coat. The lobular bronchioles differ from the larger tubes in containing no cartilage and in the fact that the ciliated epithelial cells are cubical in shape. The lobular bronchioles are about 0.2 millimeters in diameter. Each bronchiole divides into two or more respiratory bronchioles, with scattered alveoli, and each of these again divides into several alveolar ducts, with a greater number of alveoli connected with them. Each alveolar duct is connected with a variable number of irregularly spherical spaces, which also possess alveoli, the atria. Within each atrium, a variable number, 2 to 5, of alveolar sacs are connected, which bear, on all parts of their circumference, alveoli or air sacs. The alveoli are lined by a delicate layer of simple squamous epithelium, the cells of which are united at their edges by cement substance. Between the squames are here and there smaller, polygonal, nucleated cells. Outside the epithelial lining is a little delicate connective tissue containing numerous elastic fibers and a close network of blood capillaries, and forming a common wall to adjacent alveoli. The fetal lung resembles a gland in that the alveoli have a small lumen and are lined by cubical epithelium. After the first respiration, the alveoli become distended, and the epithelium takes on the characters described above. Vessels and nerves. The pulmonary artery conveys the venous blood to the lungs. It divides into branches which accompany the bronchial tubes and end in a dense capillary network in the walls of the alveoli. In the lung, the branches of the pulmonary artery are usually above and in front of a bronchial tube, the vein below. The pulmonary capillaries form plexuses which lie immediately beneath the lining epithelium, in the walls and septa of the alveoli and of the infundibula. In the septa between the alveoli, the capillary network forms a single layer. The capillaries form a very minute network, the meshes of which are smaller than the vessels themselves. Their walls are also exceedingly thin. The arteries of neighboring lobules are independent of each other, but the veins freely anastomose. The pulmonary veins commence in the pulmonary capillaries, the radicals coalescing into larger branches which run through the substance of the lung, independently of the pulmonary arteries and bronchi. After freely communicating with other branches, they form large vessels, which ultimately come into relation with the arteries and bronchial tubes, and accompany them to the hilus of the organ. Finally, they open into the left atrium of the heart, conveying oxygenated blood to be distributed to all parts of the body by the aorta. The bronchial arteries supply blood for the nutrition of the lung. They are derived from the thoracic aorta or from the upper aortic intercostal arteries, and, accompanying the bronchial tubes, are distributed to the bronchial glands and upon the walls of the larger bronchial tubes and pulmonary vessels. Those supplying the bronchial tubes form a capillary plexus in the muscular coat, from which branches are given off to form a second plexus in the mucous coat. This plexus communicates with small venous trunks that empty into the pulmonary veins. Others are distributed in the interlobular areolar tissue, and end partly in the deep, partly in the superficial bronchial veins. Lastly, some ramify upon the surface of the lung, beneath the pleura, where they form a capillary network. The bronchial vein is formed at the root of the lung, receiving superficial and deep veins corresponding to branches of the bronchial artery. It does not, however, receive all the blood supplied by the artery, as some of it passes into the pulmonary veins. It ends on the right side in the azygous vein, and on the left side in the highest intercostal or in the accessory hemiazygous vein. The lymphatics are described on page 718. Nerves. The lungs are supplied from the anterior and posterior pulmonary plexuses, formed chiefly by branches from the sympathetic and vagus. The filaments from these plexuses accompany the bronchial tubes, supplying efferent fibers to the bronchial muscle and afferent fibers to the bronchial mucous membrane, and probably to the alveoli of the lung. Small ganglia are found upon these nerves. End of section 6.